I love this time of year. The coaches ranking and the AP ranking, the preseason polls for the coaches and the AP have come out over the last week. I guess the coaches ranking came out last week. The AP ranking came out yesterday. And it's just, the responses are just so predictable, right? But you got a whole bunch of people that love to run around talking about how preseason polls and rankings don't matter. And a lot of them just will tell you like the AP ranking and the coaches ranking just in general don't matter even during the season because we have a playoff poll, playoff ranking now. So, it's just a constant barrage from these people that feel the undying need to let you know that none of these rankings matter. Until their team is ranked somewhere in those rankings that they disagree with, right? Then they got all kinds of thoughts and opinions. Oh, I can't believe they got this. If it doesn't matter, man, quit getting yourself all worked up. But I want to put the AP ranking and the coaches ranking up on the screen. We'll point out a few things and we'll see what it is people are crying and complaining about, and then maybe we'll do some pointing and laughing. But anyway, here's the two rankings here. Okay, now I'm going to admit this video is probably going to be a little bit all over the place because there's just a lot going on here, and you have a lot of kind of point and laugh situations and scenarios and just whatever. Normally, I would start maybe at just the top of the rankings and work my way through, but I can't do that here. I have to start with Tennessee and I guess Clemson because they're kind of tied together. Now, this isn't about the Clemson fans. This is more about the Tennessee people that are mad. Now, again, there's a lot going on here. The Tennessee man is beside themselves. They cannot figure out for the life of them why Clemson would be ranked ahead of them. We just played. We beat them. Okay, that was last year. This is this year. This is something where we kind of go round and round, it seems like, every time these preseason rankings come out. The preseason rankings are not a mirror image of the end of last season's rankings. Obviously, things change, right? It should be obvious. On top of that, whether you like it or not, when it comes to college football and rankings, and particularly preseason rankings, image and reputation are a big part of what you see. That can benefit you in certain situations, and it can hurt you in certain situations. The reality is Tennessee had a good year last year. Tennessee did beat Clemson at the end of last year. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that Tennessee is going to be a better team than Clemson this coming season. And it definitely doesn't mean that Tennessee should automatically be ranked ahead of Clemson. Should South Carolina, who's unranked in both of these polls, be ranked ahead of Tennessee? I mean, South Carolina beat Tennessee in week 10 or 11, whatever it was. No, they shouldn't be ranked ahead of Tennessee. I think this is a pretty fair ranking from Tennessee. I think anywhere from 9 to 15 or so, for either Clemson or Tennessee, either one. 9 to 15, I think, would be fine. Now, I actually have Tennessee ranked ahead of Clemson in my ranking. I've got Tennessee at 13, and I've got Clemson at 15. But that doesn't mean I think these rankings are particularly wrong or egregious. I mean, Tennessee and Clemson are both teams that have question marks, replacing quarterbacks. Clemson's got a new offensive coordinator. Clemson lost some defensive players to the NFL. They don't have really any wide receivers that anybody can name. Tennessee's replacing their top two wide receivers and their quarterback. Had a terrible defense last year. I mean, there's fair questions to ask about both of these teams. I think having either of these teams anywhere between like 9 and 15 is more than fair. But the idea that Tennessee fans in particular would get all bent out of shape because they're ranked 10th in the coaches poll or 12th in the AP poll is ridiculous. This is a team that's been in the gutter for 15 years. And you had one good season, but it was one good season. I mean, there's no guarantee they'll repeat the success from last year. Clearly, I think they're going to be a good team. I've got them in the top 15, but to get all bent out of shape about this is just absolutely ridiculous. And then, of course, the media just hates us. Come on. And this is not unique to Tennessee fans. Every single fan base in America has a substantial portion of their fan base that thinks everybody hates them. I know I'm not the only one that notices this. Y'all have to hear this all the time. Such and such announcer hates my team. Such and such channel ESPN hates my team, or this announcer hates my team. The AP poll always disrespects, fill in the blank team. Stop. Look, people that do the AP poll, I promise you, they are not sitting around trying to figure out a way to screw Tennessee. They're not. You don't have to agree with where they have Tennessee ranked here, but there's no grand scheme to screw Tennessee. The other thing to keep in mind with the coaches ranking and the AP ranking, unlike individual rankings that are done by like me or whoever else might put out a ranking, these rankings are polls. You're talking about dozens and dozens, and in some cases hundreds of people submitting their individual ranking, and then those rankings are averaged together to form a poll. In this case, the coaches poll and the AP poll. So let's say, for example, just to indulge the Tennessee man, that there was some group of 1, 2, 4, 5, or 10, even 15 media members whose sole purpose in life was to screw Tennessee in the rankings. Their rankings of Tennessee would get washed out because of the averaging of all the individual rankings that everyone sends in. If there's some media member out there who secretly has it out for Tennessee and ranks them 100th in their ranking, that's not going to have that big of an impact on the overall ranking Tennessee receives in the poll. It's just a ridiculous idea. Tennessee's been terrible for 15 years. They had one good year. In that one good year, their best player was a quarterback. That quarterback is gone, as are that quarterback's 2 top wide receivers. It's not beyond it's not beyond possibility that Tennessee is rightfully ranked in these polls at 10 and 12 respectively. As far as Clemson being ranked ahead of them, again, I personally disagree with that, but it doesn't mean that there's some conspiracy to put Clemson ahead of Tennessee. Clemson's been a top 10 program for almost a dozen years straight. They've won their conference something like 7 of the last 8 years. Yes, I know you beat them last year in our New Year's Six Bowl, and that was a big win for Tennessee and should be celebrated. But that win in and of itself is not a reason to rank Tennessee ahead of Clemson this season. It can be part of what you use to develop your rankings, but you can't base your rankings solely off of what happened last year. Again, if that was the case, you'd have to find a way to rank South Carolina ahead of Tennessee, and nobody in their right mind is going to do that. Another interesting thing to me about both of these rankings is Florida State being at 8 in both rankings, ahead of Clemson in both rankings. Getting back, I've heard Tennessee kind of Florida State had one good year. They're ranked ahead of Clemson and lost to Clemson. Tennessee had one good year, is ranked behind Clemson, and they beat Clemson. Again, there's no one thing that determines where these teams are ranked. All of those things are true. Florida State has been down for a while and had the one good year, similar to Tennessee. Unlike Tennessee, though, Florida State's not only got their quarterback coming back, almost their entire team. They've got the highest returning production in all of college football. Beyond that, Florida State's schedule is just easier than Tennessee's. And again, I don't know what criteria each individual that submits a ranking for these two polls is using, but some people do their rankings as a prediction, as a forecast of where they think a team will end up, right? Well, if you look at Tennessee's schedule and Florida State's schedule, I think most people would agree that Florida State's schedule is a little bit easier. They do play LSU. They do play Clemson. Tennessee's got to play Alabama and Georgia. On top of that, they play Florida, South Carolina. It's probably a little bit more difficult of a schedule than Florida State. right? So maybe that's factored in to some of these people's rankings when they submit their ranking, and maybe that's a reason they've got Florida State ahead of Tennessee. I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for them, but it makes sense to me to have Florida State around 8. I've got Florida State a spot or two higher than that, but I think that's a pretty fair ranking, for Florida State. We'll talk about the very top of the poll for a second here. Each ranking has Georgia and Michigan at 1 and 2. I agree with that completely, 100%. I don't think there's any team in the country that should have gotten any first place votes other than Georgia and Michigan. I wouldn't have been upset if Michigan would have been number 1 in these rankings. I wouldn't have been upset no matter who was number 1 in these rankings, but I wouldn't have a problem if Michigan was number 1. If any other team besides Georgia or Michigan was ranked number 1, I would think that was wrong. You got Alabama 3 and Ohio State 4 in the coaches poll, and it's the other way around in the AP poll, Ohio State and then Alabama. Those are a couple of spots higher than I have each of those teams. I have LSU at 3. They've each got LSU at 5. But again, I don't look at that and say these people are crazy. Having LSU at 5 is perfectly understandable. Having Ohio State at 3 or 4 or Bama at 3 or 4, perfectly understandable. There's nothing in this ranking so far that I've looked at in the top 10 that to me stands out as being egregious. Like, oh my God, how could you possibly have that team ranked there? Just because I might have a few of these teams ranked a spot or two higher or a spot or two lower doesn't mean I think anything in this top 10 is completely out of whack. I've got Penn State much higher than everyone else, but that's because, admittedly, I've been higher on Penn State all offseason than just about anyone else has been. I think Penn State could be the best or second best team in the Big Ten as opposed to the third best team in the Big. People act like Penn State's got to take some sort of huge leap, to win the Big Ten. They've been the third best team in the Big Ten for years. All they have to do is become better than either Ohio State or Michigan, and I think this could be the year that they do it. But there's nothing wrong with having Penn State at 7, Southern Cal at 6, whatever. So yeah, nothing really wrong with the top 10. Washington at number 10 in the AP poll, number 11 in the coaches poll. Again, I've got no issue with this. I understand why Southern Cal is the highest-ranked Pac-12 team, returning Heisman Trophy winner, best offense maybe in the country, definitely in the Pac-12. Clear questions about their defense, but they're going to outscore a lot of people. The Pac-12 teams ranked after that, to me, it becomes sort of a crapshoot between Washington, Utah, and Oregon. I, too, have Washington as the highest ranked among those three. When you're talking about Washington, Utah, and Oregon, both of these rankings have Washington the highest ranked out of Washington, Utah, and Oregon. So do I. I like their defense, returning quarterback. I like what they got going on. Utah at 14 in both of these rankings. Utah might be the most disrespected team in the country, and I'm guilty of it too. They've won back-to-back Pac-12 titles. They beat Southern Cal not once but twice last year. Beating a team twice is not a fluke, okay? You can make any excuse you want for your team losing or whatever team losing a game that you don't think they're supposed to lose, if that's what you think about Southern Cal losing to Utah last year. Weird things happen, right? We all get that. You beat a team twice, it's not a fluke. Utah's got a ton of returning production on both sides of the ball. Their quarterback is back. But here they are. Not only are they ranked 14th, they're not the highest-ranked Pac-12 team. They're not even the second-highest-ranked Pac-12 team in either ranking, and they're not in mine either. It's weird, just the lack of respect that Utah gets. Again, I'm throwing myself under the bus here. I'm guilty of it and do the same thing. Texas at 12 in the coaches and 11 in the AP, I think it's a fair ranking. 5-loss team last year. Again, another team with a bunch of returning talent and experienced quarterback. Probably the second or third best wide receiver group in the country. Got a running back to replace. We'll see if they can do it. Offensive line, maybe you want to see them play a little bit better, and clearly the defense has got to get better just kind of across the board. If they do that, I think Texas not only can win the Big 12, but could be a potential playoff team. They are the highest-ranked Big 12 team in both of these rankings, 12 in the coaches, 11 in the AP. Notre Dame at 13. Notre Dame, another example of a team that I think has top 5 potential or could finish 20 to 25. They've got games against Southern Cal, Clemson, and who's the Ohio State, right? They win 2 of those 3 games, they're going to be very highly ranked at the end of the year. They lose 2 of those 3, or even 3 of those 3, right? They're going to be hovering in the 20 to 25 range, maybe even unranked with a possible 4th loss. So 11 through 15, nothing really. Again, nothing stands out to me as being ridiculous. 16 through 20, TCU at 16 in the coaches, 17 in the AP. Kansas State is the other way around in each of those rankings. Oregon State at 18 in both of these. Oklahoma at 19, to me that seems a little high. I've got Oklahoma somewhere in the 20 to 25 range, so it's not that I think Oklahoma is going to be a bad team. I do think they'll improve. But I think there are fair questions to ask about Oklahoma, like, what is it that makes anybody... Brent Venables has only been a head coach for 1 year, and it was completely disastrous. Now, of course, that doesn't mean he can't turn it around, and I expect him to turn around. Again, I've got him ranked in the 20 to 25 range. But you're talking about a team last year whose defense gave up 30 points or more in half their games, showed no improvement at all on the defensive side of the ball. I know the talent level at Oklahoma is not where Brent Venables wants it. I mean, clearly, right? Lincoln Riley had been there for years neglecting the defense. But I thought just Brent Venables being there in year 1 would be enough to make the defense a little bit better. It wasn't. It was a typical terrible Oklahoma defense that we've become accustomed to seeing over the last 5 or 6 years. They're going to have to get a lot better this year if they want to finish ranked where they're starting, which is in the 19 to 20 range. The AP poll has Wisconsin at 19. The coaches have them at 21. I really like Wisconsin. They could be a big surprise team this year, a quick turnaround with Luke Fickell coming in as head coach. He, of course, led Cincinnati to the playoffs, multiple 10-win seasons, New Year's Six Bowls. And unlike some other first-year head coaches, Luke Fickell is not walking into a dumpster fire at Wisconsin. They've got a base level of talent there. They've got an NFL offensive line. They've got an NFL running back in Braylon Allen, who has gone over 1,000 yards 2 years in a row. They've got a good defense. What they've been lacking, we all know, quarterback and wide receivers. They brought somebody in the transfer portal. Tanner Mordecai, quarterback from SMU's got 7,000 yards passing in the last 2 years, and they brought in an offensive coordinator who's been running the air raid. So I think Wisconsin is a dangerous team. They host Ohio State in week 5 or 6, something like that. That could be a very interesting game. But I think Wisconsin's going to win the Big Ten West year 1 under Luke Fickell and could go 10-2 and finish ranked higher than where they're starting here at 19 and 21. Ole Miss, I don't know about Ole Miss. They started off 7-0 last year. Everybody knows the story. 7-0, ranked close to the top 10, and then lost something like 4 of their last 5 games. The schedule was completely one-sided for Ole Miss. All their winnable games were in the beginning. All their tough games were at the end. They lost them all. They got to start beating some good teams. That win against Indiana in the Outback Bowl ain't cutting it. That's Lane Kiffin's best win at Ole Miss. They play on the road at Georgia. Of course, they play Alabama, Texas A&M, LSU, Arkansas, both Mississippi schools, and Auburn. They play Tulane in the non-con. I've actually picked Tulane to beat them. Tulane, by the way, ranked in both of these polls, 23 in the coaches, 24 in the AP. Ole Miss is in danger of finishing the season unranked. Texas Tech at 24 in the coaches poll. I like this one. I'm high on Texas Tech. I think they could be a 10-win team this year. They host Oregon, I think, in week 2. I think if Texas Tech beats Oregon, they could be a 10-2 team. They lose to Oregon, then they could, 8-4, 9-3 probably becomes the ceiling. But I think Texas Tech has an outside shot to make the Big 12 title game. I'll be curious to see how they do against Oregon at home early in the year. Texas A&M is ranked in both of these rankings, and this is just purely speculation based, I'm assuming, on talent level and the addition of Bobby Petrino as offensive coordinator, because they were absolutely horrendous last year. 5-7, I believe, the worst year Texas A&M's had since joining the SEC. I also expect a pretty good turnaround for Texas A&M. Don't know if they can get into the top 10 or top 15. Don't know if they can beat the Bamas or LSUs of the world. They play Miami early in the year. Got to win that one if they want to have any hope of doing anything this year. It'll be interesting to see sort of the relationship between Jimbo Fisher and Bobby Petrino moving forward throughout the season. Iowa at 25 in the AP poll might be the dumbest ranking in the history of mankind. They've got the worst offense in the Power 5. They, the defense, some of that's gone to the NFL. They get a lot of it back, but some of it's graduated. But they do get a lot of it back. But just winning games 10-3. I don't see it happening. And the problem is they're in the Big Ten West, And I don't see what Iowa has done in the offseason to improve. I mean, they kept their offensive coordinator. They had to. He's the head coach's son, which is the problem. This nepotism, hiring your family members, it just never works. But Kirk Ferentz, the head coach there, kept his son as offensive coordinator. Bad idea. And when I look around the Big Ten West, I see a lot of teams getting better. Wisconsin, Nebraska, Illinois, all teams that are trending upwards, in my opinion. Iowa's flatlining. Purdue won the Big Ten last year. I don't see them ranked in here, but for some reason Purdue is. Makes no sense. For some reason Iowa is. Makes no sense to me. I don't think Iowa finishes the season ranked. Anyway, there you go. Some of my thoughts on the coaches in the AP poll. Let me know what you think down below, and have a good morning.